The Art Center inspires creativity and contributes to
community well-being
through equitable access to
and engagement with visual arts.
We collaborate to offer exhibitions,
learning opportunities, artist development,
and cultural events centered on
art, artists, and art enthusiasts in the greater Corvallis area.
Hi, I'm here with Carolina Feyling, a textile artist living in Oregon. Carolina creates functional Scandinavian style weavings, and she says her weavings serve as a bridge between the contemporary and tradition, as well as the distance between heritage and daily life. Carolina, can you speak a little bit about how heritage comes into your practice of making?
Absolutely. Well, I think first and foremost, heritage comes into my practice of making because I don't think I would be making in this capacity at all if it were not for my Norwegian heritage. I originally learned to knit when I was 16, partially as a way to kind of spend my evenings, but because I saw my Norwegian grandmother knitting so much growing up, and it was a way to be closer. And I did not learn directly from her. I learned from YouTube, and my aunt told me that I had knit wrong and backwards because of that. But I learned, and it got a lot better. So it serves as like a jumping off point for an access point for all this heritage, because I had later moved to Norway, and when I was there I really just was enamored with all the folk culture, and this really came back to me later as I was studying at School of the Arts Institute of Chicago. I felt like I was making work to kind of please others, and then when I really dove back into like the knitting, which then transformed into weaving, I really felt a lot more fulfilled and like I was doing the work that I was supposed to do.
When were you in Norway?
I was in Norway, fall of 2015 into spring of 2016. I attended a gap year school called Folkehøyskole, or Folk College, which is a kind of ungraded school that you go to in between graduating high school and college, and I studied classical piano performance there.
Wow. So you went as an adult, but you had grown up with notions of this heritage in your childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. We went about every other year as a child when I was a child, and then my grandparents would come on the off years, and then they would bring things from Norway such as dough to bake pastries that is difficult to make from scratch, or they would bring things like knit sweaters or some sorts of embroidery or woven blankets, which we would then have in our home as well.
So you would say like the tradition is part of your identity growing up, but that your art practice is helping you reconnect with it, like pieces that were maybe missing?
I would say so. The reason I even started this work in the first place is because I was overcompensating, I would say. I really felt like a lot of this was absent. My father was not very proactive in sharing this heritage with us, so I had a huge hunger for all things Norwegian. I convinced my parents to send me to Norwegian language camp when I was a teenager, so I did that 3 summers in a row. And it was just really a huge want to be a part of the heritage, because people say they are Norwegian American, but I call myself Norwegian, American. I am both, so therefore I was trying to gain access to the other half.
Right. So will you speak a little bit about the techniques that you studied in order to properly display? I mean, I'm guessing that's the right word to say. You were learning techniques that were intrinsic to the culture you were trying to learn about, and there's certain patterns that you create that are also linked to that culture. Is that correct?
Yes. So that the patterns I see in Norwegian weaving or Scandinavian weaving as a whole are definitely serve as my inspiration. I spend a lot of time looking at pieces on digital museums and reading about them in books and whatnot. My education about this style of weaving came from a Swedish weaving school in Massachusetts called Vävstuga. So following my graduation, I studied there intensively for 8 weeks. I lived on site, and I probably wove for somewhere between 6 and 10 hours a day, depending on the day. I was a little maniacal about it. And there I got a really, really good foundation about Scandinavian weaving techniques. In this school taught primarily Swedish weaving, and there's a little bit of difference in mainly in patterning and how they are used, because Sweden was a wealthier country than Norway for a very long time in pre-industrial times, and that definitely is reflected in the weavings and works you see coming out of the countries. But it was there that I really, really got the feel for it, and I have been continuing to explore that since I left the program. I should say I did this program in summer of 2021, and it is now spring of 2023, so we're coming up fast on 2 years since I've done this. But yeah, the technique is definitely intrinsic to the work, and I think I'm at a point where I am delving so deeply in like what is the technique in itself that I'm not yet at the point where I turn it on its head and explore how it fits into like me as an artist. I think right now I really am coming at it from an artisan point of view, but then again, I think that since I care so deeply about the technique, this feels like the right way to go about making the work at the moment.
Yeah. So speaking to that, there's the technique, like the patterning and like how you are moving the fibers through the loom, but are there certain materials that you use specific to this technique?
Yes. So I work primarily in 3 materials, or I would say 4. So I work in wool, which I buy from either Swedish or Norwegian companies, linen, also imported from Sweden, something called cotton, which is 60% cotton and 40% linen, and then cotton, but I do not use cotton quite as often. And these are all things that you see in a lot of historic weavings, and I think it's what gives it their like beautiful body. And also, I'm just like, I love the feeling of natural fibers. I don't really buy synthetic clothes because just like the feeling isn't the same to me. It's just the knowledge of that all of this has been passed down for like generations and generations, like raising sheep, like raising flax and all of that. Just really, really marvelous and inspiring to me, to the point where I'm like, I should pick up spinning, even though weaving takes far enough time on its own.
For your next life, right?
Absolutely. I don't know.
Well, so we're speaking today because you're in a show at the Art Center called The Evolution of Practice. And you are speaking to how your practice has evolved since graduating from undergrad, and you went and you learned all of these different techniques that were very specific to knowledge you felt like you needed for your practice. Can you speak a little bit more broadly about the importance of evolving as an artist, and maybe speak to a little bit about what might be coming up next for you and what you're excited about?
All right. So, evolving as an artist. Let's see. What do I have to say about that? One point that definitely comes to mind is I can think of 2 evolutions. Like the first time where I decided to claim the title of artist, I had actually returned from Norway and I had enrolled in engineering school, and I was feeling so miserable. I would wake up every day and say, when I retire, I'm going to open a yarn store. And my mother was like, all right, well, that's not right. You're 20 years old. You need to find something else in life. So she really pushed me to pursue fiber because it was something that I was talking like anyone who's would listen's ear off about for a very long time. And I went for it. I applied to a bunch of art schools for fiber, and I got in and pursued it. So then it was like I felt this huge pressure to kind of claim the title of artist and make things that are like conceptual and almost worthy of art school. And I got a lot of like recognition from my peers and from my teachers, and I got a couple small shows in school, which was really wonderful, but it was like making work that I anticipated others liking rather than work that I should have been making. Of course, I was very new in my artistic journey, so I didn't really have a sense of like what it feels like when you know you're making the work you're supposed to be making. But I really had a pivot when I did a piece where I knit like a bunch of letters into these Norwegian style socks, and the critique went okay. The piece doesn't actually exist anymore, which is a little sad, but I don't know, that really sparked something. And then I started doing a lot more folk art based things, and then my critiques actually did not go as well. I feel like a lot of people did not respond well to craft media and a conceptual school, even though they have a fiber department. I think there's a specific way that people treat fiber and weaving in institutions like that, and there's an expectation to subvert what other people expect of the media. But that doesn't feel authentic to me. So I really dug in and I started learning a lot more traditional media. And that's where I think this pivot happened, especially when I attended Vävstuga. I wasn't really a weaver before. Fun fact is I took one weaving class in 2018 and I was like, I don't like this. I'm never going to weave again. And I picked it back up to do my BFA piece. I learned a Norwegian pickup band weaving to make a folk costume from scratch that I designed myself. And that's really what started it. But yeah, those are my 2 pivots, from someone who sits on the couch and knits to artist, and from conceptual artist to fine craftsman, artisan, whatever fits me in the moment, whatever other people want to call me. I think they are all true to a degree.
Yeah. Do you have anything on the horizon that you're excited about, or do you feel like you're still like just kind of diving deep into the knowledge of the history and heritage and technique of what you're currently working with?
I do feel like I'm at a point where I'm really ready to dive deep. Like my previous year, actually, I completed the residency in, what was it? It was spring of 2022, and then I spent a lot of time doing craft fairs because I felt like that was a good way to connect with people in the Scandinavian community. But what I learned is that just really burns me out, and that is not what I want to work on. So I'm doing a pivot this year. I am really focusing on exploring new techniques that I have been reading about and like obsessing over in digital museums but haven't tried myself. And I'm beginning my teaching journey. So I did my first official lecture earlier this month. I have a couple workshops coming up this spring, and I'm hoping to line up some more after that.
Thank you for listening to TAC Makes. This is a new creative project at the Arts Center, and I hope you enjoy our learning curve as much as we do. You can find more episodes on YouTube and Spotify and on our website, theartscenter.net. That's arts with an S.